Sanju Verma, that post the Galwan clash, the government made very clear that it would use economic tools to try and choke trade with China, to make it tougher for China to send exports to India, that it will try and reduce Indian imports from China. That, however, doesn't seem to have happened. Instead, trade from China is increasing, imports from China are ballooning, and trade data seems to suggest that your policy of reducing trade with China hasn't worked. Why is that, madam?
You know, Rahul, before answering your question, I think today is an exceedingly proud moment for every Indian, you, me and everybody on the panel, that we finally successfully did that test trial of Agni 5, which has a range of more than 5,000 kilometers, which I think is no mean achievement. Coming now to the crux of your question, I have some data with me, and you know, you can verify this data with the economic survey put out by the government of India from time to time. The trade bilaterally with China for the financial year 2021-22 was $115 billion. In financial year 2020-21, it was $86 billion. Now, the moot point which your audience needs to know, and please listen to this very carefully. In financial year 2020-21, what was the overall size of India's trade basket? When I say trade basket, I mean basically our exports plus our imports. The value of our exports plus imports in financial year 2020-21 was $686 billion. Now, what was it in financial year 2021-22? It was $1,028 billion. The limited point I'm making is, in financial year 2020-21, if out of $686 billion, we did a trade of $86 billion with China, that is basically only 12.5% of our entire trade basket, point number one. Point number two, if in financial year 2021-22, out of the total trade basket of $1,028 billion, we did a trade bilaterally with China of only $115 billion. It means with China, we only did trade to the tune of 11.18%. Just 11% of our total trade in financial year 2021-22 was done with China. What is the moot conclusion that we arrive at? In the last 2 years, our overall percentage of trade with China is less than 15%, barely 11 to 12%. So why this whole brouhaha? Now I will just take 30 seconds to tell you why is it that you cannot blanketly, and I'm sure some of the professors on your panel will be happy to corroborate me, why you cannot blanketly ban Chinese imports or, you know, export goods and services to China. India has been a signatory to the WTO right since its inception in 1995.
Okay.
We have also been a signatory, 20 seconds, we have also been a signatory to the Geneva Convention of 1949, the GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, of both 1948 and 1984. Now, since we are a stakeholder in these international platforms, you cannot unilaterally...
Okay, so you set the stage for this debate. Supriya Shirnet, A, there is WTO obligations. Secondly, this will hurt India as well, because if we block trade, China would lose only 3% of its exports, 1% of its imports. India will lose 5% of its exports, 15% of its imports. Those are big numbers that you'll have to deal with. Secondly, while the percentage of trade has gone up post-Galwan, as a percent of overall trade, Sanju Verma makes the argument that China's share as a trading partner to India is actually coming down, so directionally we're headed in the right direction.
No, I want to first raise a few points, and the good thing with data is that you can't circumvent reality. Now, what is the reality? The reality, as pointed out there, was that it is 11% now, it was 12% before. What happened after Galwan? After Galwan, this country was told, and very many people, especially the Bhakts, went ahead and destroyed their phones, TV jala rahe the, phone jala rahe the. मोदी जी ने भी आंख में धूल झोंकने का काम किया और कुछ ऐप बैन कर दिए. You know, all of those apps that he banned actually has donated to the PM Cares Fund. We are not debating that today, I understand. I'm not going to get into the...
Talk with certain respect.
Okay, Sanju, let us speak. Sanju, let us speak. Go on, go on.
Please do not speak in between.
Supriya.
Do not speak in between. I will not let you... Rahul, if you're okay with doing this debate while she was rambling and I did not speak, I'm fine with it. I can leave and you can have a 1-hour conversation with her. I did not interfere. She should listen to the hard truth. PM Cares Fund mein blood money from these Chinese startups that supposedly were banned in India was taken. Not a word on that. There are 3 broad figures that this country needs to understand. $115 billion in 2021-22 was the trade volume with China, $86 billion the previous year, but this government actually inherited a trade deficit. The trade deficit last year, when we were doing a trade with China of $115 billion, the trade deficit was $73 billion because we were obviously importing more from China and exporting less. China, the total trade that China has with us is just 3%, we have over 11%. The trade deficit was $73 billion. But this same trade deficit, they inherited at $36 billion, which has more than doubled. So you have increased India's dependence on China year after year, particularly after Galwan, it is up 35%. Do you have an explanation for that? After Galwan, our trade deficit and our trade dependence on China has gone up and the trade has gone up by 35%. Is there an explanation? And that's not all, Rahul. We are not just debating import and exports. I think the one thing that we are not paying attention to is the amount of Chinese money there is in Indian startups, that entire community that we want to grow and we must grow. Over $14 billion of Chinese money is actually fueling our startup ecosystem. You know how much was it the year before that? $4 billion.
Okay.
Imagine if China wants to play truant, how our entire startup community can come crashing down, the entire economy.